Okay, I see us on Facebook. Ooh. Maria. Okay, cool.
It's awesome when things work.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Literally took us, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
So we get to hang out again. Our first conversation, I'm gonna put this down so I can just look at the I can look at the comments. So when I look over, I'm looking on Facebook to see if there's any comments. And then I'm looking on my phone for our questions. So I'm gonna have all these different devices, but I'm so glad that we were able to do this again. Our conversation that we had on Friday went so well. I told you earlier, I'm going to send you some of the screenshots that I received from, of course, they won't have their names, but just people in there loved for the content and how many people identified with it and agreed that they have too suffered with some sort of childhood trauma. And so really this conversation is to be somewhat of a repeat for the people that missed it. We had a few of technical difficulties, but we made it work. So it'll be somewhat of a repeat. However, we also have some more questions, and I'm sure you probably have some other things you may want to add. So let's get started. I am Erika Genice. I have adult conversations with dope people. You are JB officially, Jeannie Barnes. You are a licensed professional counselor. You are certified to speak on many of topics, but none other than this conversation. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
It is most definitely appreciated. I know you are extremely busy, and to give me 2 days out your weekend, I'm feeling real
It's worth it. It's worth it.
Cool. So let's go. So we know that the topic is childhood trauma. What exactly is childhood trauma?
Okay, yeah, that's a great place to start, is defining that, because I think, when most people hear the word trauma, they're thinking like the worst of the worst case scenario, right? And so I think if you were to ask people about, do you have trauma? I think a lot of people would actually say no, that actually do have some trauma. It's just, understanding the definition of that, right? So as I had said on our call last night, there's a couple of ways that we define trauma. And one of those is being that it's an experience of an event that's emotionally painful and distressing and has lasting mental and physical effects. That's, kind of the umbrella definition of trauma. But as I've said in our last call, that I define trauma as a wounding. It's a wounding, and it's this wounding that takes up emotional space deep within us. And many of us don't even aware that this space is being taken up within us by this wounding. But it does. And not only does it take up space, but it definitely changes the way that we see ourselves. It distorts the way that we see ourselves, the way that we see our world. And I used that example last time of the funhouse mirror, right? We've been to those, carnivals or fun houses, whatever, and they have those crazy mirrors that make you look, tall or short or whatever. Yeah. And so I always use that that example to show how trauma can distort that internal perspective of yourself. And it's tricky because, like I said, you look in a mirror, you that is you, right? Like you go to a funhouse mirror because you have seen yourself in mirrors before. That's not how you actually look. So you can reject that and you can laugh about it and say, oh, that's funny. But here's the thing about childhood trauma. You haven't seen yourself before, right? And so if the first images that you have of yourself are distorted, those aren't going away just because you get older. And so that's why this is so significant, is that it distorts the perception that we have of ourselves and the perception that we can have of our world. And that's pretty serious. That can bleed over into all kinds of areas of our lives. So I like to also define that as a wounding.
A wounded, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. What are some leading causes to childhood trauma?
Well, we all think of, like I said, when you think of trauma, you think of like the worst of the worst, right? Like, being violated in some way. And so we identify trauma through what we call big T and little t traumas. So, big T traumas are things like, being in a serious accident or, almost losing your life or watching someone else lose theirs or, being a witness to violence or having violence perpetrated on you, severe abuse or neglect, anything as far as big T trauma, anything that we could actually have PTSD from, right?
Yeah.
And then we have what little T traumas, which are, things that they're definitely overwhelming to us in childhood. We may not necessarily have post-traumatic stress from it, but it's still overwhelming to us. And it's oftentimes not really even considered trauma. I think that's why most people, have experienced little T trauma and they don't know it. And so these can be things like, moving around a lot, having maybe your parents divorced, maybe you got bullied in third grade, maybe there was a lot of conflict in your home, maybe you were the one in conflict in the home. Maybe, having your we talked about this one a lot, having your thoughts and feelings dismissed, right? Not being able to safely talk about your feelings, that can be really overwhelming to a kiddo. They learn right away that that's not safe. Even, having a pet die, things like that. Those are what we would call little T traumas. Being told that you can't have emotions, right? Like you get upset about something and your parent says, stop being dramatic. You're such a baby, toughen up. The world isn't fair, those kinds of things. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want this to bleed over into this, fuzzy line where, look, we need to help our kids prepare for the real world, right?
Yeah.
I'm certainly not suggesting that if you weren't coddled, that you were traumatized. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But we're talking about legitimate things, right? When you've gone to your parents and something legitimate really happened and you're upset about it and the parent dismisses, ignores, tells you not to have those emotions, tells you, to stop crying. We talked about that last night about, some things, we'll get to that, but things like that, right? Little T trauma. And little T traumas are significant because they go unnoticed and they're sort of innocuous in our lives and they kind of get tucked away. Those little traumas just get tucked away within us and they're there, those little woundings. And then as we go about our lives, just because we get older doesn't mean we're not vulnerable to trauma, right? And so if a big trauma comes along, that little T, the unreconciled little T traumas will cause us to spiral in the big stuff. And we'll just completely, any coping skills we have will completely disintegrate. We won't be able to handle it. And then what happens many times is that people now they feel ashamed and say, what's wrong with me? And I couldn't handle this. And is everything okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Something just popped up. It's weird, but go ahead. You're good.
Okay. So, the little T stuff is just as big because it goes unnoticed and it goes unreconciled. And so it's going to pop up at some point, but we don't oftentimes know that. And so then we start to shame ourselves because we feel like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not handling this? And why am I having these problems? Why do I have anxiety? Why is this showing up now? Many times it is a result of that little T trauma that we incurred somewhere in our life.
Yeah, I have met, especially when I was in school, but even adults that have moved around due to their, parents been in the military or a divorce, and one parent moves to another state. And so you're saying that significant change can cause some sort of trauma. How could a kid feel if something like that happened and when it happens?
So let me clarify something with that. Those things can be traumatic, especially so if we didn't have the right support systems to get through that, right? Okay. So if you were a child that sustained, maybe some of those small T traumas, and you didn't get the support, um, you're, like I said, you showed emotion about that thing and your parents dismissed it, or they were like, hey, you know what, life isn't fair. This is hard on me too. You're just going to have to suck it up. We don't have
Yeah.
time for that. So if those things happen and you also lacked an appropriate emotional mental support system to help you get through that or to help you work through that, that's why that becomes traumatic. I mean, if we go back to that definition of trauma, remember, it's an experience of an event that's emotionally painful and distressing and has lasting mental and physical effects or physical effects, right?
Yeah.
So a child can have some of these experiences and the adults don't know how to help that child get through those experiences. And so now, this painful, distressing thing, that child wasn't able to work through it. They got stuck in it. And then they kind of developed around it.
Yeah. So any advice for parents who are considering kind of, separating and moving and uprooting, any sort of advice that you have for them to deal with those sort of changes?
Sure. Well, first of all, if you are going through something like that, hopefully you've been in the process of working on your stuff anyway, right? But being self-aware as a parent is one of the best things that you can do for your kids, right? Because when you're not self-aware, you are far more likely to project your own crap onto your kids, right? You will do it. And your own traumas that maybe you had will show up during situations like this, and you won't really realize it. And so you won't be able, it creates a blind spot, and you won't be able to see those. You'll miss those signs that your kid is showing you that they're not okay. And just because a kid isn't necessarily acting in a way that we would think was concerning, we make assumptions that, oh, they're okay. Or we know that kid, we're like, you know what, that kid's resilient. They'll be fine. They'll get through this, whatever. Never make those assumptions. Check in with your children, ask them how they feel, make it safe for them to talk about their feelings. Don't, let them do the talking. Stay self-aware, do your own self-check, ask yourself, am I projecting? Am I, giving to my kid what I needed at their age, or am I, making assumptions?
How, like you said, how would I feel if something like this happened as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Put yourself into their shoes.
Yeah.
Because those changes are so challenging. And it's so hard, like you said, as a kid to kind of know how to feel. So asking those sort of questions on the front end for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And understanding too that children, the reason why those things are difficult is because they don't have any control in their world. Things are happening to them. Decisions are being made all around them that they have zero control over. They don't have any control over whether or not they move away from their childhood home, or whether or not they have to go to a new school, or, they don't have any control. You can imagine how overwhelming that is as a child, that all the major important things that would affect you as a child, those decisions are being made by somebody else. Yeah. And so they don't feel like they have any control or power, and especially when things get a little dicey in their world. So remembering that your child may feel very helpless and powerless. And so, keeping that dialogue open would be wonderful.
Yeah. That's good. How can one recognize that they have undergone childhood trauma?
So I think one of the things that can be tricky about this is that we're all going to experience tough situations. We're all going to experience things in our life that, we're being reactive to. But look, if you can take an inventory of your life and you look back and you're like, wow, I really have a history here of self-destruction, right? I have these self-destructive patterns, whether it's with my relationships or my career or just myself, if there's substance abuse, if you struggle to regulate your emotions, and you have zero control over your emotions. You have maybe extreme anger, or your emotions are just all over the place.
Yeah.
Maybe if you overshare with people, like you tell stuff to people that you don't have any boundaries, that's a telltale sign of, maybe something happened there. Difficulty trusting, shame is a huge one, right? And I think that's another one that's probably another time we should do a call sometime just strictly on shame.
I learned about shame because of you. I did not know that shame ran so deep.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So we definitely have to do a call on that, because that's its own topic in itself.
It is. And it is, it is insidious. It is one of those things that most people don't know are there, and it wreaks havoc in your life in many ways. And so, shame, and you might even, I would even say, going as far to that, people might even experience where maybe they go into certain places and they feel suddenly triggered and anxious and they don't know why. So having strong reactions to certain places, and that would seem like I have no idea why I have this, or strong reactions to certain people or certain kinds of people, and just like, I don't know why I'm acting this way. All of those things are little signs. They're signs that we constantly ignore. And we ignore them because we're afraid that those signs mean that something's wrong with us, which is shame. Yeah. But we ignore those things because we think something's wrong with us and we're afraid to find it. And so we get critical of ourselves instead of being curious. We should allow those things to be, if you can identify any of those things in your life, start being curious and find out why is that? Why am I reacting this way? Why do I have these patterns in my life? What's going on there? It's not telling you about your identity, but it certainly is going to tell you something about your root system and where maybe you have a wound in there.
Yeah, that's good. How can childhood trauma affect a child?
Okay. So kids, if you think about, kids, their brain isn't fully developed. They cannot critically think, right? We're talking about getting up into mid-teens before that part of critical thinking really starts to be developed. So as in younger children, they don't have the ability to critically think about what's happening. So many times they can't verbalize. Sometimes they can, depending on, if that's even been something they've been taught. But oftentimes you're going to see that showing up in their behavior, right? We see kids acting out, maybe lashing out, having, maybe regressing, throwing tantrums, maybe suddenly becoming anxious and fearful of things they weren't before, where maybe they don't want to sleep in their bed at night. Maybe they start being very picky about foods that they weren't before. Or you might see on the other side of the spectrum where they're starting to withdraw. They're not, wanting to be with friends, or they won't speak, or they spend a lot of time alone, or maybe they create an imaginary friend, which isn't a terrible thing. Sometimes that's an outlet, but you'll see things popping up in their behavior. The behavior is what tells us that something's wrong. Behavior tells a story. And so they're going to display behaviors that aren't appropriate for certain situations. And you had mentioned this last or Friday on our call, where sometimes that in and of itself is tricky, because we get very focused on behavior with kids, right? When they start acting out, we're like, what is wrong with you? You're acting up. I don't know. That is not how I raised you. All of those things we just start getting focused on trying to correct the behavior. And we don't really, again, we're not very investigative about like, what the heck, what is going on? What is this behavior about? Before I start trying to correct the behavior, maybe I need to find out, where is this coming from? Something's going on.
Yeah. And we talked about how, especially in the Black community, how we label kids bad, right? They're acting bad. Look at them acting crazy, acting bad.
Yeah.
When the reality of it is that there's a reason why they're acting out.
Definitely.
There's a reason why they're, not listening and cussing and all of these things that a child shouldn't do. But as parents and other people from the outside looking in, we're like, listen, that kid is bad.
Yeah.
Well, are they bad, or have they just suffered severe trauma that has been gone unaddressed?
Yes.
And then on the other spectrum is you see kids who are extremely withdrawn. And that's alarming as well, right? Because kids are supposed to be fun and energetic. And I get that, there's levels to energy when it comes to any human. But I do feel as if, both extremes. And I think when we were on the call, there was an educator who said it that, when she is teaching and if she runs across a kid who is quote unquote bad or super withdrawn, both of those are equally alarming to her, and she's researching what's going on at home.
Yeah, definitely. Right. If a kid, if you see a kid that's just trying to be invisible, that's not within the range, right? That's beyond just being an introvert, right? I mean, that goes way beyond that. And so, if we say, okay, there's quote unquote bad behavior, that doesn't mean the kid is bad. It means something bad is going on, right? Something bad has happened. Something bad is happening. Something's going on within that child that's not okay. And it doesn't mean that they themselves, they're not just innately bad, but something is bad.
Something's wrong.
Yes.
That's a trigger for sure.
Yeah.
How can we recognize if childhood trauma has affected us as adults?
So again, look at how you interact with relationships, right? Are you good at trusting people in a healthy way, right? It's not like we should just be passing out our trust to everybody, but are we, do we struggle to trust people? Do we struggle with intimacy? And I don't mean sex necessarily. I'm talking about intimacy. You think about intimacy, that's kind of letting people see into me, right? And so do you struggle with that? Do you hold everybody at an arm's length distance, no matter who they are, even your own children? Substance abusing, do you tend to try to self-medicate, and you don't have good coping skills? Do you not have good boundaries, right? Where you don't know where you end and other people begin in your life? Or do you feel like you're emotionally responsible for other people? Do you feel like it's your job to save or rescue or fix? Do you feel like you have to earn your worth in people's lives? Do you act like a human doing instead of a human being, where you think that's just your sole purpose, is to be running around doing stuff instead of, having a healthy balance of what I do, but I am a human being outside of what I do, right? Those kinds of things. Those are just a few examples.
So how can you associate that to childhood? So if a person, let's just tackle one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Someone struggles with boundaries. How can you associate that sort of behavior as an adult to the direct relation as a kid?
Okay. Well, look, in order to find out, like, where is this coming from, right? And I always use that analogy, like, I used to use this a lot with my adolescents, where we would talk about, thinking of yourself as a tree and that your behaviors are fruits. And if you got rotten fruits, it's because the roots are not good, right? The roots need to be treated. And so we have to trace that back of what's going on in my root system. Where did this get started? Because it's poisoning my fruit, right? So we need to get investigative. We need to walk it back and say, where in the heck did this come from? And how long have I been doing this? So we really have to investigate first, right? Okay. And investigating means you need to sit down with somebody and you need to be able to say some stuff out loud. I mean, when we talk about investigating, this is not a passive thing. This is an active process that you actively get intentional and purposeful about saying, I recognize these things in my life and I don't need to be afraid of what it means. I just need to be willing to heal that stuff. And so a lot of times, not always, but I would say the vast majority of times, when people really sit down and they really start walking it back, they realize, like, oh crap, this has been there a long time. right? This is stuff that I learned, or this is something, from either maybe little T or big T trauma. One of the things that I talked about last night or Friday night was what we call, things that are like overlooked or accepted forms of childhood trauma. Like I talked about the parentification, and how, a parent might have zero boundaries with a child, meaning they are confiding in that child. They are telling that child everything that's going on that child has no business knowing. I don't know how many kids walk into my office and tell me stuff. And I'm like, and how do you know that? Like, they know stuff they should not know.
Yeah.
And, because a parent has confided, your dad never takes me on dates. He doesn't do this anymore. Your mom hasn't, slept with me in 5 years, or, your dad, talking, whether it's about finances, their intimate life, their, dad came home drunk again, whatever, blah, blah, I don't know. Right. But just confiding in that child, telling them everything that's going on, or, depending upon that child for, to be a partner to them, to console them when they're upset, to take on responsibilities that are beyond what we would, normal chores of what we would try to teach people, the kids, as responsibility. This goes beyond that, where now they become responsible for their siblings, cooking dinner, taking them to appointments, making sure they're getting their homework done, things like that, where they actually become a partner in the home.
Yeah.
Things like that. There's zero boundaries with any of that. And the kid doesn't know there's really anything wrong. They know that it's not right, because they know they feel burdened by it, but they don't realize, like, this is not okay. And it's teaching me it's distorting my perspective about relationships and boundaries. And so, and I also, we didn't talk about this last time, but you can even look back at your own childhood and look at your parents and say, did I have a trauma mama? And did I have a trauma papa? Right? Did my mom have trauma? Did my dad have trauma? Because that's going to show up. In fact, I have a little, I'm going to scroll down here, because I've got some little notes on that. And that's not to, sometimes people struggle with that stuff because they feel bad to look at that. They think, well, my mom was a good mom. And that's probably true in some ways, but two things can exist at the same time, right? Two things can be true at the same time, where your mom might have been great in some aspects, meaning you knew that your mom loved you, but your mom might not have been healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
You know what I always say? My parents did the best that they could, that they did as good as their trauma would allow them to.
Definitely.
So your parents do as good as their trauma would allow them to.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to your point, they are loving, they love you, but if you get down to your parents, they suffered trauma, their parents suffered trauma. And so it just has become so generational.
Yeah.
Which is why this conversation is so important, because if we can have generations of trauma, we for damn sure can have generations of healing.
Definitely.
And it starts with conversations like this. But yeah, our parents loved us, but that does not negate the fact that you were traumatized as a kid.
Absolutely.
And we were affected by that. And so you gotta call a spade a spade.
Yes. Yeah. And that certainly, by acknowledging that stuff, it doesn't mean that you're condemning them. It doesn't even mean that you're judging them. But if look, at the end of the day, if they weren't healthy, then more than likely they did and said things through their parenting that had an effect on you and continues to have an effect on you today. And as you had said, sometimes it just gets passed down. It's a generational thing. And so it's good to be able to look at that. Sometimes people get a little like, ooh, that what's funny is that people will say to me, they'll acknowledge these things, but immediately follow up and say, but I mean, they were really good. Like we always had food in the house and stuff like, what I feel like they start to, then they feel suddenly like they have to defend their parent. And there's no need to do that, because we're not attacking them, but we are acknowledging.
And I think just as humans, we do that just in general. Like my your brother can kill somebody and that was bad, but he's a great person. He's good. He's always been, you know, my boyfriend cheated on me, but listen, he got a good heart. Like it's always just, no, call it what it is.
Yes.
Call it
Yeah,
what it is. So
absolutely.
I think we try, which is a beautiful part of most humans, if we try to see the loving parts of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what it does is cover up the parts that's not so good. And that's
Yeah.
the part where it becomes not so healthy.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, I think the other reason that we do that, aside from the fact that, you know, that as humans, yes, it's innate in us that, you know, we want to love and be loyal and those kinds of things. The other reason that we defend it is because, especially when it's a loved one, we are not just defending them. Truth be told, we're not just defending them, we're defending ourselves too, aren't we? Because when you said, oh, my boyfriend cheated on me, but you know what, he has a good heart and he's a good provider and he does the ABC, right?
Yeah.
We are also defending us, aren't we? Because we're afraid of also what that says about us if my partner cheated. So we're not just defending them, we're defending us too, aren't we?
Really? So how does that relate to, so I get the relationship part, but defending
your parents?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, when you look, I think what happens is that when people start talking about their parents and they start sharing some of those real things, they many times, this is the first time that a person's really said this stuff out loud. And look, they are your parents, but think about it. You came from them, right? So then you start hearing that stuff and then you start thinking, what does that say about me if I'm sitting here talking about my parents being all jacked up?
Ooh.
Does that mean I'm jacked up? Because I'm not jacked up. I don't think I'm jacked up. You know what I mean? So that's why we're defending it, because then we start hearing it and then we start getting fearful that it means something about us if our parents were messed up. Then we are afraid, oh my God, does that mean I'm messed up? Right? So we're not just defending them. At the end of the day, where it's that, and that's shame. Again, that's why we're going to talk about shame at some point, right? Like that shame shows up. And yes, a part of us is defending them, but there's a big part of us that's defending our own selves in that too. We're just not aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, you hear a lot of people say, I don't want to become my parents.
Yeah.
I don't want to become that. And you fight so hard to not become them, whatever that is, right? But then you become something else that is not as healthy either.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So that's one of the ways that, you know, when we have endured, even if we say trauma, maybe even dysfunction, right? If we've endured those kinds of settings in our homes, one of the ways that shows up in us as parents with our own children is that we try to overcorrect, right? I don't want to be like my parents, so I'm just going to do everything that they didn't do, or I'm going to do whatever they did. I'm just going to do the opposite of that, right? We start overcorrecting. So for example, if we had a parent that was very harsh, very controlling, all of those things, then as a parent, we might overcorrect by saying, I'm not going to have any rules because I felt like this as a kid, and I don't want my kids to ever feel that way. So then they don't have rules. And then what they don't realize is that's just as harmful to your child, that you have zero boundaries or expectations or a structure in the home. That's equally as harming to them, because I see it a lot.
Yeah.
And so we do this overcorrecting thing. And this is why it's good to heal that crap inside of you, because if you don't, then you're just running around doing a bunch of stuff that actually doesn't work.
It's not working.
It doesn't work. And you're still hurting your child in the process. Because you don't even realize what you're doing, right? All you know. So it's not enough to just say, I'm not going to do what my parents did. It's not about not doing what they did. It's about doing what your children need you to do.
Yeah.
And you can't be focused on them if you're clouded with your own trauma.
Yeah.
Or dysfunction.
Yeah. Let's see what Rachel said. I'm afraid to even click on there. I don't want to mess it up. Let's see what Rachel said. would you suggest that parents and children have therapy together? Great question, Rachel.
Yeah, yes. I think, depending on the situations, I don't typically find that to not be helpful unless it depends on how far down the road that parent is, because sometimes there may be a lot of just the individual baggage is so much that it would get in the way of having a parent-child session. So it really depends on, has that parent done enough work on themselves that their individual stuff isn't going to show up in the sessions. But sometimes you can know that before, and then sometimes in some situations that I've had where I've had parents and kids together, that I've realized I'm like, oh, and I've told the parents, like, yeah, you're going to have to do your own work, because we can't even get to this stuff because all of this stuff is in the way, and the kid doesn't need to be part of that.
Yeah. And it clouds, if you're carrying so much baggage, it's hard to even have a decent conversation, because it's nothing but trauma.
Oh, everything's triggering, right?
Everything's triggering
all over the place. And everybody's upset, and you spend most of that session just putting out fires and nothing gets done, right? So it really just depends on how healthy, definitely how healthy the parent is, and in some cases depending on the age of the child, them too, but it sort of depends on how healthy everyone is about how constructive that will be as a group, as a parent-child session.
Yeah. So Rachel, thank you for asking that question, because this question wasn't even on my list. So now I'm going to go to kids in therapy. What are your thoughts on kids going to therapy? Are there particular situations that you would recommend that they go immediately? Is there an age group or age range where you feel like therapy could help only a certain age, because they'll be the only ones that really understand what's going on? Or can it start at the age of 2? What's your thoughts on just kids going to therapy? And is there any examples of where you're like, not even examples, but recommendations on, they need to go to therapy ASAP because of X, Y, and Z?
Well, I would say, again, that's a variable, right? There isn't really a blanket answer to that. It really depends on circumstances. For younger kiddos, they can definitely go to therapy. We have what's called play therapy, right? Because as a younger kiddo, like I said, that critical thinking. So it's not like you're just going to do psychotherapy with, a 4-year-old. You can't really do that. So, play therapy is helpful. And usually that is when you have that something is going on in that child's life that has disrupted. And something that we had talked about Friday that's really significant is that when a child's sense of safety has been disrupted through whatever way, right? Maybe something traumatic has happened. Maybe it happened to the family. Maybe it happened within the family. Maybe it happened, around, whatever. But if that child's sense of safety has been disrupted, especially significant, then those are definitely times that you want to get that kid into therapy. And I think it also depends on what the family system looks like. Is it healthy? Is it stable? Is it strong? Because in some cases where maybe I visit with, my client might be the parent, and then they say, oh man, this has really helped me. I want to get my kid into therapy because this has been so great for me. Well, that kid may not really need that. What in some cases, what I've been able to do is say, well, what's the concern? If it's not anything that's really, really significant, the child's sense of safety hasn't been disrupted or any of those things, then I can give parents strategies about how can you pass on what you've gotten for your own self? How can you teach your child at home how to identify their emotions, how to name them, how to manage them, regulate their emotions, because that's something that can be taught in the home. But like I said, if there's a significant situation that has disrupted that home and the parents aren't healthy and they can't be there for that child in that way, then yes, seek some therapy for that kid so that there's a safe place, because that's what therapy is supposed to be. Among a lot of other things, it's supposed to be a safe place. So for younger kiddos, it sort of depends. Teens, I mean, let's face it, this is a tough world to live in as an adult, much less a teen, right? And if you are a parent of a teen right now, and I am, school is a tough place to be, even for the teachers. Let's be real. Like, it's a lot. There's a lot. And our kids they have access to the world in ways that you and I didn't. I say you, but you're younger than me. I didn't have access to the world at 15, thank God. And the world didn't have access to me at that age. But that's not true for kids now, right? They have access to so much. They know everything that's going on in this world, and it's a lot. And it's not only that, it's just tons of pressure in the school, social media, all of those things. So do I think that teens, definitely most teens could probably benefit from having a space that, again, that they can talk that through? Because you also think about, and not all teens, but a lot of teens also feel like, I don't want to talk to my parent about this or that. It doesn't even have to be that they have a bad relationship. Maybe the relationship's really good, but maybe they're just like, I feel embarrassed, or I don't want to share that. And so as far as teens go, do I think that, do they have to be in forever therapy, or, weekly, or any of those kinds of things?
Yeah.
But just introducing your teen to therapy is a great idea, to let them know that that's always available to them, not only now, but maybe even later as an adult. They're more likely to seek that out for themselves because they're familiar with it.
Yeah. And it's something that I said that I was going to introduce to Ryan when she became of age, whatever, teenage, right?
Yeah.
Is just going to therapy. And maybe the sessions won't be anything major, hey, school's a little, it's a lot of pressure, but kids are a little mean, but I'm able to whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about boys, I'm thinking about sex, I'm thinking about whatever that she may not be as comfortable speaking to her or her dad about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But introducing her to therapy at a very young age, so she feels like this is a safe space.
Yeah.
So when life hits you, as it will,
yeah. Yes.
that going to therapy is like, oh, I've been doing this, I'm good.
Yeah. Right.
I feel comfortable, right? I have a JB. I have my mom, but I also have JB that when I don't want to talk to my mom, I don't want to talk to my dad.
Yes.
I have that space. Do you feel like that would be healthy for parents to incorporate?
Yes. And I'll tell you the other benefit to this. My husband and I actually had a conversation about it. He works in the public school systems as well. And one of the things that we see is that, and obviously it's natural, I think we can all even admit to this as teenagers ourselves, but kids tend to build a wall of teens, right? Like, they go to each other, but they're all just as lost as the next one, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a bunch of drowning people trying to save each other.
Yeah.
And so, and I get it. I mean, it's natural that you would want to talk to your friends about things, but many of them, I find that they may have something really serious going on. Maybe they're self-harming. Maybe they're having suicidal thoughts, right? And the only people they can go to are their friends. But unfortunately, their friends have no clue how to really help them through that. And so if we introduce kids to the idea of therapy and we normalize that, we make it safe, we deconstruct maybe some of the stigmas or some of the labels that get attached to that, oh, if you go to therapy, you're crazy, or, whatever, right? We start normalizing that look, okay, fine, talk to your friend about your, boy drama or whatever. But if something gets more serious, that you feel safe saying, I need to go talk to someone else about this. Like, my friends can't help me.
Yeah.
I can't just build a wall of teenagers around me and wonder why things aren't getting better. They're all giving each other the same bad advice.
Yeah. And it's just making it cool, right? You see those sweaters all the time. Therapy is cool. And as cheesy as it may sound, it has legit saved my life. And I know many of other people that I've connected with. And so it's a big deal. And, I started going as an adult. I can only imagine, had I been able to talk out so many things that happened to me in my childhood earlier on, how that would have shaped my thoughts and my beliefs and just me as an adult, right? And so parents, if you're listening, therapy is cool. Figure out a way to introduce it to your kids early. You are not their savior at all.
And don't be afraid. I've had other kids, and including my own teen daughter, who, if those kids have friends that have gone to therapy, and then the friend says, "Hey, I go to therapy, maybe you should go to therapy," right?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
what I have been aware of is that the kid will then say, "My parent won't let me go to therapy. My parent won't take me to therapy." And I think there can be a lot of reasons for that. One being maybe there's finances and, whatever, right? The other is that, and I want to say this to parents, because I think parents get fearful that their kid is going to come into therapy and talk about them.
Yeah.
And the parent is fearful of what that child is going to say about them. Or is the child just, or how did I screw up my child, right? Like if I see a lot of adolescents. And so, it's not, sometimes I'll have a parent that comes in that says, "All right, well, tell me how bad I've screwed my kid up," right? And that's not really the case, right? So look, don't be afraid to let your kids go to therapy and talk about whatever, even if it's you. Therapists are not the people police. We're not here to police you. That's not what we want to do. If your kid comes in and they tell us something about you, first of all, we already know that there's two sides to everything, right? It's not that we don't believe what the kid is saying, but we also know that kid has their perspective. We know there's a lot of feelings that are involved in shaping that perspective. And so don't be afraid. Don't feel, that you're going to be judged, or that you're going to be looked at as though you're failing your child, or that you're not being a good parent. I wonder how many parents have hesitated to put their kid in therapy because they're afraid of what their kid might say about them. And then they're afraid they're going to have to go before the judge, which is the therapist, and answer for that. That is not what we're here to do at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think thanks for even saying that and making that space safe for parents to feel comfortable in that. But the reality of it is that it's not about you.
Right.
Right. It's about the kid, and it's about getting them the help that they need professionally early in the game, so they can grow up to be functional adults and to not have all of the baggage that we carry. And so you have to put that aside of, yes, my mom's mean, my mom yells, my mom drinks too much wine, whatever, she works too much, whatever, right? That they will say that some of it's true and some of it is just an exaggeration, because that's what kids do.
Yeah.
But let them get it out. It's not your job to tell them how they feel.
Right.
So allow them to get it out. I just had to say that.
Yeah.
That just hit
I love that. I love that you said, it's not about you, and it's not about you. Right. I think that's something that we as parents have to consistently remind ourselves. I need to not make this about me. This is not about me. I'm projecting, all of those things. But I think I wanted to say that out loud because I don't think it gets said. But anyone that works with adolescents knows that this is an issue, that sometimes parents are hesitant to do this because they're afraid of, what is my kid going to say? And then now even if I think I'm an okay parent,
come here,
I now feel embarrassed to sit in front of this therapist and try to explain myself, and that, again, that's not what this process is about, right? It is about healing the kid and many times helping the family to heal.
Yeah. And I would think, as a mom, that I would want her to give her side of how she feels. And, honestly, there are things we can do better as parents.
Yeah.
And so even getting the perspective of, Mom, you yell too much, right? I'm thinking my voice just loud and I'm just assertive. And she like, no, you're screaming at me. You're mean.
Yeah.
I need to know that. I need to know how I'm parenting.
Yeah.
Every time you come home, you're pouring up a glass of wine. Well, baby, my day was hard, but maybe that's a trigger to her.
Yeah.
Right. And then she grows up. Well, my mom drank every day in front of me. So it's just it's the lasting effects of, this is how this kid feels, and allow them that space to be open and to be honest. Yeah.
And again, making that case for resolving your own childhood trauma, resolving your own childhood dysfunction, resolving that little wounded person inside of you resolving that, because Erika, that's many times people, you're sitting here saying, I want that, but there's a lot of people that are carrying around all of that stuff that say, I don't want to touch that. And if I let my kid go to therapy, it's going to start touching things that I don't want to touch.
Mm.
And so this is why we want to resolve that. That's how that can have an effect on you and your child, is that now you don't let your child talk about those things because you don't want to talk about them. Because if they start to talk about those things with you, then it starts causing you to remember, like, oh crap, I'm doing the same thing that my parent did to me.
Mm. Yeah. I pray for healing.
Yes.
I pray for healing. I
thousand
pray
times.
that parents can push past those things and get the healing that they need.
Yes.
So we don't continue to pass this on, man.
One of the things I do want to share, I didn't do this Friday, but if people are looking for some resources,
Okay.
right?
And while you're talking, I'm going to look on the Facebook chat. So I'm going to look okay, but I'm looking.
Go for it.
Okay.
Some resources that I actually really value when it comes to, if a person says, hey, I recognize that there's some stuff there that I need to look at, work through, heal, all of that. This is a fantastic book. It is, looking at helping, it sort of teaches you how to look deep, how to look at that wounded part of you, how to look at that lost, wounded part of yourself, and how it's affecting you today and what you can do about it. So there's a great book. There's a workbook that goes with it that you can be proactive and do the workbook along with the book.
What's the name of it?
It's called Healing Your Lost Inner Child.
I'm going to put it in the chat. Healing Your Lost
Inner Child.
What was some of the nuggets you got from it, JB?
So one of the things that I frequently work through with people with this is, one of the things noted in here is what they call these impulsive reactions that we have. And these are just these reactions that, when something happens, and it doesn't even have to be something major, it can be a minor, right? Just little things. But there's this whole list of these impulsive reactions, and I'll just read off a few of them. Things like shutting down, somebody comes at you, maybe they have a problem, you shut down, you withdraw emotionally, blaming, getting too involved in relationships too quickly, oversharing intimate details about yourself too quickly, sabotaging, projecting or mind reading what others think or feel about you. That's a one that I see a lot. Pushing emotions down until they manifest as anxiety or depression, hiding, overworking, overcompensating, checking out, feeling less than, feeling greater than. So there's this whole list of, these kind of these impulsive reactions that we do. And these are the things that we do. These are the things that we did in childhood to protect ourselves. When something was unsafe, when we felt unsafe, or it was chaotic, or, something was going on, we did things as a kid to try to protect ourselves. And many times those things worked for us as a child, but they don't work for us as adults. And we oftentimes bring those old skills, those coping skills, we bring them into adulthood and we do them when we don't feel safe. And it doesn't even have to be something major. It can be something really, what you would look at it and go, that really shouldn't be a big deal, but I had this reaction to it. Why did I do that? Right. And so this book really talks a lot about learning how to understand why you do some of the things you do. You don't need to be critical or judgmental about the fact that you do them, but look at it and say, oh my gosh, that's the wounded part of me. When something happens and it touches that wound and I don't feel safe, oh my gosh, I have these automatic behaviors that I do.
Yeah. Can you talk about, we talked about it on Friday, and I don't know when we inserted it into our conversation, but remember we had, we started talking about like the parent that overcompensates, that their child is in every sport possible. They're overworking to provide when it really is for maybe something else, or just like overdoing it, right? And I think that I was telling you about Ryan, like there was a lot of things in my childhood that I didn't experience just because, my parents were, they didn't really have a lot of money when I was born. They ended up doing well later on, but they also had 6 kids and I was the baby. And so, your girl got left out a little bit, you know what I mean? They just said, after me, they was out, I'm good, right? The baby ain't getting nothing. And so I remember that, taking it into, and I still do as a parent, where now I just want to give Ryan everything in the world, from every trip, every sport, to, I was working, my prior job, I'm working all of these hours. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder because I wanted her to see just how amazing her mom was in corporate and as a Black woman. And look, I'm strong, your dad and I didn't work out, but like, we good. Look at your mom. She's strong, right? She's powerful. And I wanted to show her that. But the reality of it is, it was something that I was trying, because she didn't need all that. She just, some of it is, but can you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Can you touch on it?
Yeah. So when we do that, and it sort of goes back to, I think we had talked about that because we had talked about how does, that unresolved stuff, how does that show up in your life, as an adult through parenting? And, we mentioned about the overcorrecting, right? That I'm going to do what didn't get done for me. And I'm going to give my kids a better life and all those things. But I think that when we start doing that, we need to ask the question of, which kid am I doing this for? Am I doing this for my child, or am I doing this
for
this child?
Yeah.
Which one are you doing it for?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you spend more time parenting your lost inner child than you do your child, then you're gonna miss it. You're not gonna actually do for your existing child, who, by the way, your child is not an extension of you, right? Because that's another thing. We look at our children as these little extensions of us. That's not who they are. They're their own thing. Yeah. They're their own person, their own little person with their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own perspectives. They're not an extension of you. And you somehow giving your child everything that you didn't get is not going to heal your past. It's not going to heal that.
So you think that's kind of subconsciously why we do it, because we're trying to heal something that we didn't have. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're trying to heal. And I don't think we know it, but we're trying to heal the that wounded kid in us. We're trying to heal that kid. And meanwhile, the kid that, our child is standing in front of us going, hello, I don't need any of that. I don't even want to do that stuff. Right. Yeah. And then what do we say to that kid? What do we say to the child that we're trying to give them all these things and the kid is saying, I don't want that? We say, you are so ungrateful.
You are ungrateful.
Right?
Yeah. We get so mad. I'm doing all this stuff. You in every sport. You'd have been to Disney twice.
Right.
I ain't never even been to Disney.
How much I have to work to give all of this to you. Everything I do is for you. Yeah. And you don't even care. Right. Like we're missing it. Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah. We get very much this ungrateful spirit to our kids, right? We project that on them. How dare you not be, I bought you these Jordans, right? These expensive shoes, and now you outside playing in them. What you think? Right. Like, I'm taking you to Disney. I want you to, you should be excited. It's like they would be excited if you just watched Encanto with them 95 times. That's what makes my daughter excited. And so I love that we brought this up again, because it really is about, is it about you or is it about the kid? Now, nothing's wrong with experiences, right?
Right.
But make sure that your heart posture is right.
Definitely. Ask yourself, who am I really doing this for? What's the starting line that I'm coming from with all of this? We need to be, again, we need to constantly be investigating, and especially when look, if you are finding that you're having a lot more conflict with your child than you want to, you need to look inside, right? And start asking yourself, like, I'm having a lot of conflict and I need to know it takes two hands to clap, and I am one of those hands. And so I need to look at me first and find out, where am I coming from that is potentially creating some of this? Do I have a blind spot? Am I missing it? Like, what's going on here? If you're finding that your child, and by the way, I mean, if you find that, okay, I'm doing all this stuff and my kid is just ungrateful and all the things, and maybe they are, maybe your kid is, maybe we've entitled them, but even still, why did we do that? That was still us.
Yeah,
we teach our child to have these expectations
Yeah.
of these things, and then when they indeed have them, we say, that is so ungrateful and entitled of you.
Yeah.
So we still have to look at us.
So essentially we set the tone.
You're teaching your kids. How do you think that they're learning their expectations and all of those things? Where do you think they're learning that from? Like, wow. It's not a fairy at night that's sprinkling that over them. That's us. You know, we are doing that.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I mean, you know, so we need to be able to ask ourselves, you know, okay, do I have a blind spot? Where have I contributed to this, instead of just constantly trying to correct the kid
or put the blame on them?
Yeah. And our kids do need redirection and they do need correction. Don't get me wrong. I mean, my kid will be the first one to tell you that I will definitely redirect, but I do have to ask myself that question of, you know, when something's off, that I'm like, okay, what is my part in this?
I love that. And I'm sure that most parents, because even you saying it to me, I don't think like that. When Ryan is what I consider to be misbehaving or not listening or being a little bit more entitled, you know, what is it that I'm doing? What environment have I set the tone for, right?
Yes. And you know, when you do that, when you make that a practice, because when I've done it and I realize like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I think I did miss the mark there. And then I can go back and say, hey, look, we had this falling out. Here's where I realized where I went wrong. And here's what I knew that what I now know I could have done differently. And so I am going to do it differently. However, here's where I also see that you could have done that differently, right? Yeah. Kids can be receiving of that, because now you didn't just go to them and shame the crap out of them. And you didn't, you know, you, right? Yeah. You've now told them, I own some of this and here's how. And then guess what? Magically, we are teaching our kids how to do that. Because what's one of the things that I hear all the time about kids is like, my kid never takes responsibility for anything. They just blame everybody around them, right? Well, I wonder why.
At 6 years old.
Right.
All you do is blame people at 6. Like, what else are they supposed to do? So, I'm going to move on. Because you know I got to touch relationships. You know, it wouldn't be the girl if I didn't. You know, I have an obsession. I'm going to get this right. but overcompensating and giving your kids everything, can that be connected to some trauma that they may have later in life? Meaning like just this entitlement, and as they get into the world is not mirroring that back?
Yes, I would say more so, you know, small T trauma, dysfunction. Are we setting them up to fail? Yes. And will that failure in turn potentially turn into small T traumas or even big T traumas? Yeah, you bet. Yeah. You bet. We're setting them up to fail when we do not, and, you know, help them to create healthy, realistic expectations of themselves, of the world, all of those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tackle a couple questions. I'm going to try to wrap this up by 8:30. Okay. So we got about a good 15 minutes ish. Let's talk about childhood trauma and how that shows up in romantic relationships.
All right. Okay. So some of the things that you might see with that, as far as, you know, how you behave in that, would be struggling to have emotional intelligence, which emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your feelings or be able to recognize other people's feelings and respond appropriately to that,
Yeah.
where there's an awareness of that. Maybe struggling with empathy, maybe having too much or too little, being able to, struggling with having accountability, being reactive, not being able to trust. Again, the intimacy is disrupted, where I don't know how to have intimacy because I don't know how to have safety. Because safety, I didn't say this before,
Okay.
but the underlying issue when it comes to trauma, especially childhood trauma, is safety, right? The disruption of a sense of safety. And if that doesn't get put back right and that doesn't get restored, that's going to stay with you. And so that disrupted sense of safety will cause a person to go into that into those defense mechanisms where they avoid intimacy, they avoid trusting people, their expectations are really probably going to be distorted and skewed. I think we had talked about Friday how we don't really know how to tell people what we need, or we don't know what we need, but we just know that we expect other people to know that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and we don't even know what we need until we didn't get it. And then suddenly now we're aware I needed that. And so your partner is failing a test they don't even know they're taking with you.
Yeah.
And the communication styles are disrupted. Attachment styles are disrupted, right? The way that we attach or don't attach, those kinds of things are disrupted. We might even, in some cases, in some relationships, we're reenacting our trauma, meaning, I had this kind of relationship with my parents. There was a lot of fighting or arguing, those kinds of things. And you know what? I know how to do that. I don't know how to deal with it when people don't argue with me. That feels weird and that's not familiar. So in some cases, we're reenacting the trauma. Again, not intentionally. It's not like it's at the forefront of our mind where we're like, I'm going to go out with this person to reenact my trauma. That's not what we're doing, but we will seek out familiarity. We will seek that out because we're either that we're familiar and it's comfortable and I know what to do with it, or B, I'm trying to resolve it. If I can make this work, if I can fix this person, then everything that I couldn't do back there will be somehow resolved, or somehow I'll feel better about what happened if I can just make this work.
Yeah.
So we'll tolerate dysfunction and we'll allow things in relationships maybe we shouldn't allow, all for the sake of familiarity or for the sake of trying to reconcile.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because we, like I said earlier, we try not to be our parents.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself in the same
in a relationship. Yes.
In relationship with similar people, and I'm gonna talk about mine. I'm just talking about in general, like, my dad was an alcoholic. So now I date alcoholics, or my mom was, used to yell at my dad all the time. So now that's the only way I communicate.
Yeah.
All I've ever seen was my dad abandon us. And so now the attachment issues become, I just need somebody because if my dad abandoned me, I can't stand for a man to abandon me.
Absolutely. 1,000%. Yes.
I can't stand that. So I'm going to stay in this relationship because I seen what that caused my mom, right?
Yes. Yeah.
My dad cheated on, and not my dad, I'm just using an example, but my dad cheated on my mom a million times. She stayed, it was acceptable, right? So that must be acceptable for me. And so that's the first example of like all I have, and of course not now, but my first example when I started dating people was my parents.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. That's your first
not the best marriage. So I didn't have anything to really pull from. And so, I've done a lot of work in trying to pull from different things and healthier relationships and all that, but I bumped my head along the way, as we all do. But that example and what you're setting up matters.
It does, right? It's that's what they see, that's what's being modeled, and we don't really, as a child, you don't recognize that, right? You don't realize that that's your model. You don't even realize that you're storing all of that away. But trauma, and especially trauma and dysfunction that occurred within the home and within parents, that's significant. It's significant. If it's not, again, if that isn't healed, if that's not reconciled, if that sense of safety isn't restored, you're going to bring that right along with you in your relationships and your romantic relationships. We talked about, when you're dating, right, that some of the things that how that can affect in your dating life, even if you're not married, where I brought up, that maybe you focus on people that you can fix or rescue or save. Maybe you are, looking at somebody or dating somebody and you're recognizing like some things don't align, right? But you're like, oh, I can fix that. There's so much potential there. And, I feel bad because I don't want to judge that person, and everybody's worthy of love, right? Because maybe you're thinking back about your own parents. Maybe somewhere in the back of your mind, you didn't like the things that maybe your dad did, but you also felt sorry for him, right? You still loved him. So you're looking at this person going, well, I don't want to judge them. They deserve love too. They've got potential. I just need to help them through this, right? We try to justify reenacting our traumas.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just not unknowingly.
Right. We're not even being conscious of it, right? Where many times we are not being conscious of these things, these processes. They're happening so quickly that it's just almost automatic. And so this is, look, among all the other benefits of therapy, one of the major benefits is that you learn how to stop and slow down and pay attention to things that you were not paying attention to before. Because you can't change something you don't acknowledge, right? You can't turn the car around without hitting the brake. So you're learning how to hit the brake and say, whoa, hold on. Let me rewind that, and let me even say out loud what I just said in my mind.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I have is, I believe who I decide to introduce my daughter to long-term or choose to marry would have a direct impact on her childhood experience.
Yeah.
As a single, and I'm talking about the other singles that may be on here, right? That's not married, because I can't help. You can help them, but you already then said I do, so I don't have nothing for you. But for the people who are trying to do the work single, right? Do it on the front end. What are some things that we need to be laser focused on when considering to date a potential partner? And meaning, of course, what exposure, because how you treat me is how my child sees us, right?
Yeah.
So what should we be looking for as singles?
Yeah. Well, safety, number one, right? Is this person emotionally safe, mentally safe, physically safe? Because if they're not safe for you, they are not safe for your child. Wow. I mean, point blank. So if you have, even an inkling of, gosh, I noticed that when I say these things, he, gets standoffish, or he starts, or I can't talk about that without him shutting me down, or he, she, whoever, right? If there's safety is number one, because without that, I mean, nothing else, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what else is there if safety isn't there. Safety has to be there. That has to be the first thing.
Okay.
And if safety is there, but maybe there's other things, right? It's a whole lot easier to work through some of the other minor issues because there's a sense of safety. This person is safe. They're safe emotionally. They're safe mentally. They're a safe person. And so I would say that it's that, right? How do you feel safe with them? Can you say things without being dismissed or shut down? Can you express emotion without them being like, oh, or even angry about it? Can you confront them about things and say, hey, you know what? The other night you said this, and honestly, it's still been bothering me and I really want to talk about it. Are they going to say, why do you have to be so dramatic? Why do you have to make problems that aren't there? Why do we have to, how do they respond when you go to them with things? How do they respond when you cry? Because if they're upset with you crying, you're probably not going to be okay with your kid crying, right? So
all they do is cry.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
is there safety? That's really the number one thing.
Safety.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's one of my fears as a mom is having someone show up into our lives and
Mhm.
her having an experience of this person not being good to my mom.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's why I've been doing so much work
Yeah.
on myself. So my discernment and my picker looks different because she has to have, because her and her dad and I have a great relationship,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
we co-parent
great.
well. So for me, I'm good. So she doesn't even care about romantic with that because we
Yeah.
are safe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but if I'm bringing somebody into my life intimately,
Yeah.
has to be a great experience, not just for me, but for her. And I
Yes.
think that, and not just women, men too, they get so caught up on feels. I'm in love, I'm this, I'm that. And I'm like, yeah, but what you're showing your child is for a man to abuse you and
Right.
for a man to disrespect you and for a man to come in and out your life and don't have that sort of safety, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so those things for me is so crucial.
Absolutely.
When considering dating, and hell, marrying
Yeah.
is so important. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I just can't marry anybody. I'm sorry. It's not it's just not gonna happen because who I choose to do life with affects me. It's not just about me and feel
Right.
goods and sex and trips and selfies.
Yeah.
How do you handle our family? How does my daughter feel about you?
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
a direct effect of how he treats me. And really it's about how he treats himself.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, 1,000%. That's a great point, is looking at how does a person even treat themselves, right? How do they talk about themselves?
Yeah.
How, what are the words that they use about themselves? Because that will tell you a whole lot right there. But safety is everything. It just is. It's foundational. If you don't feel safe, think about the domino effect that has when you don't feel safe,
Yeah.
not just physically, right?
Yeah.
But mentally and emotionally.
Yeah. Because if I don't feel safe, I'm sure my child won't.
Right.
Right. So it's hard to just skip past the mom and give it to the kid because they're watching.
Absolutely. And she'll know that anyway, right?
Yeah.
She'll know that you don't. Kids are like little barometers of a home.
Yeah.
They can point out all the stuff, even if the parent's like, oh, I didn't know that they knew that. I'm like, well, they're listening, they're paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah. So treatment available.
Mhm.
What are some treatments that adults, we talked about kids, but for adults that's looking to have more conversations like this and dive into their own personal lives,
Yeah.
what sort of treatments are available for them?
Okay. Well, there's a lot, right? Like when it comes to trauma, there are specific trauma, modalities that are focused more so on trauma. So EMDR, ETT, somatic, psychodrama. There's all kinds of different modalities, and then obviously there's psychotherapy, which is mostly, it's just talk therapy. And the great thing about those modalities is that for some people, depending on the trauma, the depth of their trauma, depending on the severity of their trauma, some people struggle, right, to talk about that stuff because, it's painful. And so it's almost as though their brain won't even allow them, right? They can't even remember it sometimes because it's buried so deep to protect them. It was, for survival. And so those modalities can help people to sort of, it's like a back door to the brain to access that trauma so that they can safely process it without reliving the trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there are other, like I said, small T trauma, psychotherapy many times works just as well, where people, it's not something that was so traumatic that they can't bear to think of it again, but rather, it wasn't. So now they can talk about it. They can openly say, oh my gosh, I realized what that was. I realized the impact of that. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, just depending on what the need is.
Yeah. And I always say that, therapy is like finding a good therapist or finding therapy that works best for your situation is like finding a church, right? Like you don't go to one church most of the time and like, this is the best church ever. Like I had to search a number of different churches until I felt like this feels like home. And it was the same thing with therapists, right? Like a couple therapists, I'm like, nope, doesn't work for me. And so just remember that.
That's a great point, because look, some people will go and they didn't have a good experience. And it's not because, necessarily anyone did anything wrong. It's just, this is a very personal process. So people have to connect. Like that's the magic beans of therapy, is that it's the connection. It's just that people mesh. If you don't mesh with someone, don't give up on the process altogether. It doesn't mean therapy doesn't work. It just means that wasn't your person.
Yep.
And so don't be afraid to try it on until you find one that fits, right? So that it's not uncomfortable and it's not awkward and weird. And once you find that person that you're like, okay, we mesh, that I get it, that person gets it, then that's when the real work can begin. And so, I think sometimes people, maybe they go to one or two and it wasn't a good fit, and they're like, just forget it, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not that it doesn't work. It just means you got to find your person.
Yeah. One size does not fit all.
It doesn't.
When it comes to therapy at all. So guys, don't give up on therapy if you had a bad experience, because there are so many different therapists that can help. You just have to keep trying them on. Like you said,
absolutely.
Till you find one that works.
Yes.
And where can they find you?
So right now our office is undergoing some changes. Right now, our office is in Frisco. We're going to be moving to a new office, and it will also be in Frisco. And so we'll have a new address and all of those things. Our name is going to change as well, because we're having some people moving in and moving out.
Okay.
So right now our practice is found under Barnes and Cook Counseling. The new practice starting in April will be North Frisco Counseling Associates. So all that information will be, they'll be redirected on our existing website. All of that stuff will be on there, be redirected, and they can find us. If all else fails, you can always look my name up on Psychology Today. You can find any therapist you want to on Psychology Today. You just type that person's name in, boom, it'll pull it up.
It's a really good website.
It'll pull up all the information, website, contact, all of those things. And I have lots of great therapists in my office that are all trauma trained. They're all fantastic. They're all wonderful, wonderful folks. And we do office visits. I do, everyone does both office and telehealth. So for some people, telehealth just works better, maybe because of location or just time in the day of, getting to and from work or the office. So either way works. We do both.
And I'll be sure I'll drop your information once we get off the phone.
Okay.
I'm afraid that I'm gonna mess it up. So I'll drop the information in the chat, and then I'll drop it on my page too.
Okay.
For anyone who's looking for.
And if anyone has any questions regarding some resources, even if they say, I don't want to go to her, but can you tell me about some therapists? Like I'm all good about handing out resources too. So
we just want to get them help.
Yes, that's the most important part. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. So shame, we will talk. We may have to do it in March or April.
Yes.
We have to do a conversation on saying shame. You changed my life when you broke down shame.
Yeah, that is a biggie. And I feel like if everyone on the planet understood shame, I think everybody would be going at life from a totally different perspective.
Yeah, we'll connect then. Well, thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
for inviting me. This is great.
This was awesome. It went way more smoothly than the initial call. So now we know Zoom merged to Facebook. Listen, we figuring out this. We old. We figuring out this. We figuring this out together. But I don't. I was telling my cousin earlier. I was getting a little embarrassed. Like, man, technology isn't working out in some of my lives. And then I'm like, I'm doing the Lord's work. I don't care what I need to do. I went out to get this laptop. I told you I have to get this content out. And I think that's a good nugget for people who are interested in starting a business. It does not always
Yeah.
run smoothly, but you need to
Yes.
still keep going. We don't get to stop because technology messed up, or Facebook Live, or I couldn't like whatever. Who cares?
Yes.
Keep going. Keep going.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you kept going. I'm glad. Thank you for continuing to troubleshoot this and,
Yeah.
and go
Yeah.
at it. So,
Yeah, you know I'm relentless when it comes to healing.
yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your
Thank
weekend.
you. Yeah.
Have a great night. Thank you, everybody who came out. I
Yeah.
will be sure to
Yes.
drop her information in the chat. So thank you. Have a good
Awesome.
day.
All right.
Have a good
You
week
too.
Thank
Yes.
you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.